Stop to question whether our daily actions are actually helping or hindering the biodiversity of the planet. Stop suppressing our calls of the wild and begin to benefit from the fruit of our own labours, the non-air-freighted fruit of our collectively owned land. Stop building clone towns, cities, metropolises of factories, offices, businesses, luxury flats, car parks, slave chain bars, slave chain restaurants, casinos, malls, supermarkets, hypermarkets. Stop. To counter and embrace the taboo. Stop to counter Thatcher's Tina. There is no alternative. Stop to consider taboo. There are billions of options. Create cross-cultural, cross-continental connection. Connection without commodification. Controversial, conversation, circus, carnival, converge, commons, communication, cabbage, cauliflower, carrot, couscous, curry, cup of tea. Comrades, citizens, cooperatives, come together to create community, co-mutiny, a critical mass of convivial consensus, cultivating confidence in creative capacity, crafting contraptions against climate chaos, campaigning, critiquing, constructing, considering, cooking, clowning, climate camping, challenging, confronting, cycling, cooperating, collaborating, co-realizing. Realize, remember, reconnect, come together, come full circle, come as we are. Come. Come. So, yeah, I think we're now going to ask you to remember to fill in your evaluation sheets. Very subtly there. Have we all got evaluation sheets? Where are the evaluation sheets?
Oh, they'll be there for you on the way out. Just please do them.
So yeah, so remember, as well as remembering all the brilliant things and inspiring things you're going to take forward and connect and change the world, evaluation sheets. The webcast is working. Hello, internet.
We've got 2 watchers at least.
We've got, wow.
One of them is my mum.
Hello. Great, so evaluation sheets, and now we're going to watch film.
You're going to try?
Okay, we're going to try watch film, so thank you very much.
Yeah, that's you.
Just so I can, sorry, my name is Heraldo. I'll try to help as much as I can with the translation of what something that they say. The whole film is about 50 minutes long, but we just choose about 5 minutes, just so you see the case of Chico Mendes and that's the beginning of his journey there in Brazil. And I'll try to keep up with what they say as much as I can.
Os seringueiros aprenderam isso com os indígenas.
Que o povo que vive aqui nesta aldeia de seringueiros vive uma vida relativamente feliz. Eles são bem mais felizes, estão muito melhor de vida que o colono que em breve chegará aqui e acabará deslocando. Que loucura por parte do governo querer que isso aconteça. A vida do colono, além de bem mais dura, é um estilo de vida insustentável.
So the colonizers have the really hard life and unsustainable. When they
Ao
come
longo dos
to the land.
últimos anos, vimos os colonos destruírem a grande floresta de Rondônia.
So for the past 10 years, they see the colonizers just devastating the whole
Isto
Rondônia.
eram seringais,
It
e a
was
maioria
the
dos
rural
seringueiros
plantations.
acabou nas favelas das cidades
And
grandes.
then most of the rural sappers end up in the shanty towns, in the big cities.
Todo o processo de desmatamento e desenvolvimento foi possibilitado pela pavimentação da estrada BR-364 em direção a
Big road
Rondônia.
towards Porto Velho.
Por isso, quando soubemos que ela ia ser prolongada para o oeste,
So
na
when they
direção
knew
do Acre,
that they would carry on
decidimos ver o
building
que iria
that road. It's when they start making the move because they knew something would happen there.
Naquela época, as bonitas florestas do Acre estavam relativamente intocadas.
So that time the forest was
Os
just
seringueiros viviam em clareiras isoladas,
only the rural
mas
sappers
não eram
used to
indefesos
live there
como os de Rondônia.
in their own land.
Durante uma década, seu líder foi Chico Mendes,
And
que
for a decade,
organizou os seringueiros e
was
sindicatos
Chico Mendes.
para lutar contra os que promoviam o desenvolvimento.
And then he joined the syndicates to help them against the colonizers.
Com 9 anos de idade e durante 20 anos eu montei seringa direto. Só em 75, mais ou menos, quando chegaram os fazendeiros, entrei no sindicato, aí eu parei mais um pouco, cortava menos.
This is his start in the rural sapper, and then when the colonizers started coming, he joined the syndicate to
Os seringueiros geralmente sangram cada árvore 2 vezes por semana,
they take the
uma
ruler out of the
utilização
trees, twice a
sustentável
week.
da floresta que pode durar para sempre.
So this way they can keep the tree stays
Naquela
there.
época, a casa de Chico ficava em uma clareira suficientemente grande para alimentar algumas cabeças de gado e para manter sua família e a de seu irmão uma plantação de alimentos
So the rural
básicos.
sappers,
Como todos os seringueiros, eles produziam seus próprios alimentos e tiravam seu dinheiro da
keep
floresta.
some
É
animals
por isso que eles
and
detestavam
grow
os fazendeiros que
some food there
derrubavam a
just
floresta para
for
semear
themselves
grama.
to use it.
Em 1986,
Why the
a
colonizers,
principal
what they were,
fazenda da região
that
de
was the
Chico
reason they
era
were
de
hungry with
propriedade de uma
the
empresa a
colonizers.
3.200
They
quilômetros
just
dali, em
devastated
São Paulo,
a
o
huge amount of
gigante
land just
frigorífico
to
Bordão.
plant grass for the cows. And the first and the biggest one they had that is this one. This is a company in São Paulo. They bought the land in Acre to create that, to build that animal. The big exportation is 42% for Iraq, 20% to
A
England.
intenção dos fazendeiros é realmente tomar todas essas terras, mas
The intention of the farmers
nós
is
não temos nenhuma intenção
just to take the whole land.
de entregar essas terras para eles. E a nossa luta é pela defesa da seringueira, da castanheira. E essa luta nós vamos levá-la até o fim, porque não vamos permitir que as nossas florestas sejam destruídas.
We won't permit that the forest is devastated.
Para limpar esta terra, a fazenda Bordão expulsou os seringueiros que aqui viviam há
Clean the
décadas.
land.
E Chico considerava o gerente da fazenda Bordão, Tomás Coelho,
Expelled
seu
all
principal
the rural
adversário.
sappers that were living there. And he is the manager of that colonizer.
Qual o aumento da pastagem por ano aqui na fazenda? Bom,
It's
mas
asking
como
how
eu
much
disse,
the
aqui o
farm
aumento da
needs to
pastagem,
grow
agora
yearly.
daqui para frente, nós vamos precisar aumentar no mínimo 200 alqueires por ano.
Per
E
year,
o
they
nosso
have,
700 hectares.
because of the growth
Se
of
não
the
houver
industry,
algum preço
200
diferencial,
hectares,
seringueiro e
not sure how much a year. The land is for the workers. They were saying.
Durante uma década, os seringueiros tinham sido treinados por Chico neste
For a
tipo de
decade,
protestos
Chico
armados.
trained
para convencer os trabalhadores das fazendas a não derrubar a floresta.
to go around the farms.
Raimundo era primo de Chico e seu
To tell
braço
people
direito.
to don't devastate the forest.
Pode ficar despreocupado que ninguém. Claro que não, você é um trabalhador de nós. O objetivo é
You can stay calm, so we won't touch you, because you know we are just working there as we are as well.
E é de todo trabalhador. É uma beleza para eles que eles vão ficar com tudo, porque aqui tudo vai ficar cercado de arame e cheio de boi.
This is only gonna
Então, acima de quem não vai
make a profit to the farmers,
tem que haver
because they're just gonna devastate the machine and put
conhecimento
wire around the farm, and nobody else is gonna be able to use the land.
Os seringueiros dificultaram o desmatamento e prosseguiram causando tantos problemas que alguns meses depois, a Bordon vendeu sua fazenda.
So they kept doing these protests around these farms until that specific one, which was the biggest one, just decided to leave the farm and that to go to the other states anymore.
Nas eleições de 1986, Chico era o único candidato cuja campanha principal
I think probably, don't know if we're going to be able to see how they move, we're going to somehow control it. I know it's not translated or anything. Very interesting. I've never watched it before Kooj asked me to do it. So very, Brazilian was very interesting for me to see that. But from there, he just carried on his journey to, like, he started to into the politics, trying to get elected, to get more power so he could make more things. But again, it was him against the other politicians, has those millions and millions of money there, so he didn't stand a chance. Then eventually he died, but then with his death, the other people around, kind of instead of pulling down, he just kind of gave them power to push even more. So then he goes to America, he goes to Europe, big like seminars, and eventually they find a way of making the land in Brazil like a reserve, so nobody could touch anymore. And then is why loads of problems against that happen because of money, profits, and everything. I hope I helped a bit.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Gerardo. That was excellent. And like, I don't think many people have seen this footage, as we say. So one of the great things to think about this project is that there's lots of connections. So Benedita, who sent Kooj the video, is very keen for an English translation. So that's maybe something we can work on. And I'm sure she'll be very happy for that message to get out wider and to go up on the internet. So you've got a very good sneak preview there and a live translation. So thank you once again. So one of the things that's not in that clip and not in the story I quickly summarised is that Chico obviously butted against the powers that be, and he was executed. He was shot dead by a paid assassin from the landowner where he was protesting. And yeah, tragic. He was 40, late 40s, I think. So he was aware that this was a risk that he was taking, but even so, he was fearless, and he carried on organising. So in the live link that we have coming up, we will be able to ask Maria about the state of Brazil now and how Chico is remembered in Brazil and how the movement is still continuing. Because as I understand, there's still quite a lot of assassinations of activists that are going on, but also some great moves and great ground has been gained since inspired by Chico's actions. Okay, so next,
Switch to the live link.
we're going to switch to the live link. Brilliant.
No.
So this is Maria.
Yeah, she's online
perfect.
already, so we just need to switch
Okay,
the
so-
projector to.
Great. So we're going to have a live link with Maria Benevides. And she's a Brazilian journalist who's working for NGOs, research institutions, think tanks on media relations, and content production related to environmental issues. She has previously worked. Oh, there she is. Hello.
No, you need to look over at
I
the
need to look here. Okay.
She's over
Good.
back of our heads.
So we're just introducing you and your very accomplished CV. Previously worked as a producer for the BBC World Service, BBC Action in London, acted as a UNHCR spokesperson in Angola, press officer in Brazil, editor in South Africa, head of communications for the British Embassy in Brazil, and your continuing interests are in green economy, sustainable development, Amazon forest, and the people living there. So welcome.
We're not getting any sound, Leon, or whoever's there. Hold it. I think you can hear us, Maria, but we can't hear you. Just bear with us for a minute.
So the first question we'll ask when she can hear, oh, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. But the first question we'll be asking is, what are the important issues now for Brazil in terms of climate change?
Oh, will we get there in a second? Can she speak? So we can test it. Just like that. Tap on a mic or something like that.
Should we try now, Maria? Can you use...
No, we still don't. Simon, have you got a toe?
I've got plenty. Okay, right, a relevant poem.
Maria, can you keep tapping on your microphone so we can keep hearing a signal?
So yeah, like I said, influenced by Chico, one of the things he said was how he knew he was going to die, and he wasn't afraid of that. And I think that is something that's very inspiring to myself, because another person whose anniversary of assassination was just last week, Malcolm X. That was 50 years since his assassination, and Malcolm X often said that the reason he was able to do what he did was because he considered himself already dead. He had a previous life, and obviously lots of criminal activity, and so he saw himself as living without fear, and he was able to thrive and to go about his business without fear. I think fear is a controlling force that has been used to stamp down a lot of activity. So Chico and Malcolm
it's using that as
moving forward without fear. That's a very long link.
Dolby
It's a poem. I'll read it if I've got time. Okay. So this poem, it's dedicated to Malcolm, tenuous link, and it is about freedom, which is not irrelevant. That's what we're talking about here, and that's what Chico was fighting for. Necessary freedoms. In answering a poetic task by Sister Cortez, he recounts his admiration for Brother Malcolm and Sister Lawal. In contemplating the true essence of freedom, he asks himself, how free can we truly be? Can we be so true to self that we forget self, forget who we are supposed to be? Naked when all others are clothed. Sit while others stand. Stand while others sit. Dancing to the beat of our hearts, so free to scream, to shout, without consequence, without conscience. To cry and not know, not care why. Laughing for the beauty, for the futility of it all. He meditates on Malik. Mawali El Haj Malik El Shabazz. Yes, being once already dead, one can truly live without fear of death. He renounces his name and gender. He, she becomes they. Then they want for nothing. They leave the washing up to eat from the bins, to ponder barefoot under great acacias in northern forests, roam bare-chested across southern plains, making love as and when. They wonder about the question, is this freedom, or has the poet, or has the ego just exchanged itself for self-indulgence? To be free like Nawal el-Saadawi causes consternation. At 80 years young, maybe they too will be on the front lines in Tahrir Square, but to be free from all worry for family is perhaps to be too free. Troubled by unreconciled urges, the nagging pang of revolution, faith, duty, surrounded by non-believers, he returns to change nappies and dig vegetables. So we do have other poets in the room, actually.
Coming through now. We're on, I think. We are?
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So for me, it's now 5:20. I'm in Brasilia, capital of Brazil. Thank you very much for having me and for waiting till we could sort this problem out. As it was said, I'm a former economics journalist. I worked for the BBC World Service forever, for 12 years. I'm back in Brazil for about 3 years, and all this time I've been working as an environmental journalist. But now I'm working on the other side. I've been doing a lot of press work for NGOs and for a few NGOs networks, and sometimes for international think tanks. Most of my work now is about trying to highlight environmental issues in Brazil in the national and international press. So it's really great to have been invited for this, and I really, really appreciate. Okay.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, the first question we have for you is, what are the important issues for climate change in Brazil at the moment?
And I think as you've seen in this short film, brilliant film actually, I'd like to have it, and I'm more than happy to translate it for you if you wish. The main issue when you think about Brazil is Amazon, and the main issue on climate change is deforestation. Deforestation is still the biggest single source of greenhouse gas emissions in Brazil. It has fallen a lot, some 80% since the 70s, when, as you've seen in the film, the government was stimulating people to go to the Amazon and slash and burn and create cattle. So they felt it was a way of conquer the wild forest and colonize it and make sure the country wouldn't lose the forest, the Amazon. It was a way to keep territory, actually. And this conflict you've seen that happened almost 30 years ago was about territory. Today it has changed a bit. The deforestation is controlled, but it's still very, very big. Up to now, some 18% of the Amazon forest has been slashed and burned. This is, Brazil is the football country, so the equivalent is always football fields. It's about 90 million football fields have been destroyed. It's now, the rate is 5,000 square kilometers a year, more or less. It grows a bit, it falls a bit, but it has been steady for 2 or 3 years in this level. which is a lot still. Is about, I think, one football field a minute. But still, Brazil is the country that has given the biggest contribution for reduction of greenhouse gases in the last decade because of this amazing reduction in deforestation. It was out of control. Now it's under control. The country, the government has done a lot on enforcement. A few weeks ago, the biggest deforester of the Amazon was jailed. That took some, I think, 2 or 3 years of intelligence work to try and get him. They got him because of tax evasions. Yeah, true. Yeah. He was very powerful. He lived in Novo Progresso. I've been there last year. I do a lot of travel to the Amazon to take journalists. So I was with a journalist of a major Brazilian newspaper there, and he was the owner of the supermarket, of the biggest hotel, of mostly everything in the city. So it was a powerful guy, and it was a great work. Brazil is really doing good in controlling it. What the environmental specialists are more or less consensual, I think they are very consensual actually, is that beyond enforcement and repression of illegal logging, there must be stimulus for sustainable development. Ways of developing the Amazon, which is 49% of the country, differently from what they did in the south, in the southern parts of the country, and this is not happening. The Amazon has cities, big cities like Belém and Manaus. It has small cities. It has villages. It has what Chico Mendes used to call peoples of the forests. There are Indians. There are former slaves that created settlements. They were fugitive slaves, and they went far into the jungle, and their descendants are still living there. There are fishermen. There are people in the forest. The forest is not pristine without anyone. It has people in there, and these people, they need to make a living. These people deserve, a better sort of a development than we had in the southern parts of the countries. But still, they're entitled, to live out of the forest, and this sort of this stimulus has not been happening. And last week I was invited. It was a big coincidence actually. I was invited to write a press release on a meeting and a network of forest management institutions and the Ministry of Environment. Forest management is a set of techniques to continuously exploit the forest, wood and wood products, but in a way that it doesn't harm the forest. It's done with a lot of science, and it's considered to be ideal for communities such as this one Chico Mendes was living in, because the price of the rubber is really low now. They cannot live all year long of the rubber tapping, even though they have now a farm of condoms and stuff. Anyway, I was invited to attend the meeting, to write the press release afterwards, and luckily the eldest daughter of Chico Mendes was there. So I had the chance to ask her what the legacy of her father was, and how he was viewed in the country, because I knew you guys were going to ask me that here, and she answered what I had the impression was actually happening. He's a lot more well known abroad than he is in Brazil. It's not that he's not a household name, but no one really seems to know what he was about almost 30 years on. His name has been given to a government institute that is responsible for the national parks. he's probably name of many streets. But even in Acre, even in Chapuri, where he lived, apart from the rubber tappers, his legacy is slowly being lost. But that does not mean that other leaders, other community leaders, are not fighting in the Amazon. And one of the demands, this network of a forest family, this was about community and familiar forest management, small communities. They went to ask for stimulus, which they don't have. And the fight now, they said, it's not about territory, as it was 30 years ago, but it's about forest resources. So now the fight is with illegal loggers, and the illegal loggers basically do the same thing the farmers and colonizers were doing 30 years ago. They are threatening their lives.
Thank you. Brilliant. So before we open it out for questions from our assembled audience here, can you talk about the water shortages that are happening now and what are the future issues with water?
Sure. Actually, the water sources, the water shortages, they are happening in the southeast of the country. Many people believe São Paulo, the biggest city of Latin America, has now rationing. Not official rationing, but many people, including rich people, people living in the most affluent parts of the city, are going without water for days on the run. And the politicians, they blame the weather, the lack of rain, of course. They are getting prepared to do major projects to try and save more water when it eventually rains, and diverting rivers and all sorts of things. But no one is talking about trees and the Amazon. Actually, there's a phenomenon called flying rivers, in which the humidity of the Amazon actually flies all the way down to the southeast. If you look into the globe, into the map, you're going to see that the southeast of Brazil, the same latitudes, is all deserts all over the world. And because of the Amazon, nice tropical weather, Rio and São Paulo, where we can enjoy and live and have big cities. And this is now really under threat, and it's luckily it's not the water shortage, but luckily people are talking about that. Politicians still are much behind in the conversation, but normal people like you and me are talking a lot about that and talking about. I interviewed yesterday a researcher who told me that he did a study on the water basins of the main rivers in São Paulo, which are drying up. And he said that 30 million trees are needed to reforest the margins of those rivers, so they can actually start to produce water again.
We just watched the documentary on Wangari Maathai before we linked with you, and one of the things that Wangari Maathai is known for is the Greenbelt movement and planting trees. So you're mentioning how trees are needed. Can you tell us about, are there any movements right now, maybe inspired by Chico Mendes, that are doing actions like this?
Yes. Actually, the peoples of the forest, these guys I was talking about before, the rubber tappers, were still living there. Chapuri, where Chico Mendes lived after his assassination, was transformed in a collector's reserve. It's a forest reserve. Living there, and they are able to collect the rubber. They're able to collect nuts, Brazil nuts, and they would love to be able to work with wood, because wood has a much bigger value no, or in a sustainable way, in a familiar and community managing way, and these are some of the people I was talking about before are actually people from Chapuri, the same place of Chico Mendes. There are also more organized institutions, such as this network I do press office work for. It's called the Observatory of the Forest Code. The forest law has been relaxed 2 years ago because the farmers in Brazil thought it was too tough and it was too difficult to comply with. No one was complying with the law, so they sort of lowered the bar with the excuse that they now would be able to comply. And this observatory is a group, a network of 20 institutions. It has some big players such as WWF Brazil. It has very small players, small NGOs planting trees locally. This sort of thing, exactly the sort of people you're talking about. And the aim is to make sure the law is enforced, and farmers receive also stimulus to are stimulated and are encouraged and get things such as tax-free and actual financial help as well to replant, to do reforestation, to comply with the law, to have the percentage of native vegetation they have to have under the law, and to start undoing all these 90 million football fields of trees that we've been robbed from. No?
Thank you, brilliant. And I did wear my Brazilian symbolic colours T-shirt today, but it does say freedom from football on it, so that was my concession. Okay, we're going to open it out to the audience now. So does anybody have questions? And let's maybe take two at once, just for time. Brilliant.
I wanted to ask you, the people who live in the big cities like Rio and Sao Paulo, I was wondering what kind of a connection they have with the forest, because I heard it's so difficult to visit, so very far away, and people have told me it's like only rich people go on a kind of a safari, or they don't have much of a connection. I just wondered if you tell us a bit about that.
Okay, brilliant.
It's true.
Can we take two questions? Another question?
Yeah.
We know that we're all can you hear me? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. We know that we're all interrelated, and we know that the soil and the climate and the oceans are interrelated. And recently I saw a documentary about the Black Earth. And we know that people have been in the Amazon such a long, long time because it's sustainable. People and the Amazon are sustainable. How are we all going to be sustainable? You are there at the very epicenter of it. And that is my question. We are outside of the Amazon, but we also are appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so first question on the connection between...
I think the two questions are actually interrelated, no? Yes, it's true. The Amazon is far away. It's half of the country, but it's the northern half of the country. Tickets are expensive. I only go there a few times a year because I work with this and I have other people paying my tickets. Tourism is in its infancy, although I've been in a canoe trip. It was sort of an activist canoe trip in the Xingu River. It was called Bye Bye Xingu, because of the third biggest dam in the world, Belo Monte, is being built in Brazil. And this part of Xingu where we went canoeing, it's going to die. It's not going to be, we're not going to be able to do a canoe trip there anymore because it's drying up. And there were 70 people actually paying to go there and actually to to roam for 3 days on the run. So if given the chance, if there's a stimulus again, I think this is really the key word, there's an enormous potential for tourism in Brazil, in the Amazon. O Alter do Chão, which is sorry, it's a beach place, but it's a river beach place. It's in the margins of Tapajós, close to Belém, and I was the only Brazilian tourist there. All the other tourists were foreigners. So I think there's an enormous potential, and I think this could be one of the sustainable development solutions for the Amazon tourism. It's really, really amazing. The forest is amazing. The rivers are amazing. Tapajós has white sand beaches. One of the nicest places I've been ever. And on the other question, I think part of it has been answered, and the other part is what you can do if we in the big cities want to do something about that. What these people need, firstly, is visibility. This sort of event is really great. It's a pity I couldn't bring any of these guys to come and talk to you, because I think they would be much more valued to talk to you than me. They need to have a voice. The reason why you know Chico Mendes, it's because a researcher, an anthropologist actually, an American anthropologist, paid his ticket for him to go to a World Bank meeting and to tell the representatives of the World Bank what was happening with his community with a development project funded by the World Bank. And this was in the New York Times, this was in the Times of London, and then he's got world visibility. I was reading a bit about the life of Chico Mendes to come to this meeting, and one of the things that struck me, and I didn't know, was that he gave an interview to Jornal do Brasil, a national newspaper in Brazil at the time, a very big newspaper, 2 or 3 days before he died, talking about his death threats and telling that he was not afraid he was going to die. And the editor thought it was too political and actually just ran the story after he died. So one of the things you can do is to try and figure out, to tell your newspapers you want to hear about these people, you want to know about the contemporary Chico Mendes around Amazon, because there are many. And the other is to make sure that you tell the people who are selling things to you that you want to have legally binding wood when you buy wood from Brazil, that you want to have forest code compliant fruits from farmers who actually comply with the forest code in Brazil. The consumers, especially the European consumers, have a lot of power over this. If I interviewed someone from Bunge, which is a big trader that buys the Brazilian soya, and I was asking him what your buyers are worried about, and they're worried about deforestation. So they now make sure that none of the farmers they work with are illegal deforesters. If you could do the same for forest code compliance, if you could do the same for forest management community produce, that would be a great way for us in the big cities, especially Europeans and Americans in big cities, to help populations in the Amazon to go towards sustainable development and to make a decent living, which is all of us are entitled to.
Thank you for those. Brilliant. Do we have a couple more questions?
Hiya. How confident do you feel that your politicians are properly dealing with the issue of sustainability and fighting corporate interests that are working against environmental sustainability? Do you feel that they are perhaps in the pocket of them?
I think they are doing very poorly. I think they are doing an appalling job on the water shortages. I think they did an appalling job in the forest code reform. But politicians are politicians, no? They live out of pressure from the people who vote for them. So I think it's also our fault. You know, Brazil it's a young democracy, and we're still learning how to deal with politicians. But on the major issues of climate change, I think politicians around the world, even all democracies, are doing really poorly. Now we are the ones who have to put pressure on them, for them to put their act together. This year is a key year. We have the climate conference in Paris at the end of the year, when the world is the leaders of the world are expected to finish a final climate agreement that's going to be binding from 2020. Brazil has done a great job of slashing deforestation, but still our emissions per inhabitant are growing much more than the rest of the world. And Brazil used to be a leading country in this issue. We have a voluntary commitment, which is something, I think it's the only country that's a biggest emitter from the developing side of the world that has a voluntary commitment. But we are lagging behind this time. No? We don't have a proposal up to now. We have a new science and technology who used to be, he hasn't talked since he took office a month ago, but he used to be a climate denier. So, yeah, I'm very optimistic, because I think somehow humanity, when it gets to the edge, it acts. I think it happened before, and it will happen this time. I'm naturally optimistic, but I think our politicians in particular, and politicians in general, are doing very poorly on these issues.
Same here, we were saying. And we've got time for one last question.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, so firstly, I just wanted to respond to what you said about asking the mainstream newspapers to tell the stories of other champions like Chico Mendes. But I think it's equally important, if not more realistic, to expect alternative press to tell these stories, like we're having an interaction with you tonight. So we need to circulate this information so that it becomes kind of like mainstream knowledge. But I also wanted to just get you to clarify something, because you were talking about, I got a little bit confused. You talked about 50 million football pitches are being erased every year, deforested.
No. It was, the number is 90, actually, 90 million football fields from the 70s up to now.
Okay.
And that is 18 of the total area of the Amazon forest.
Okay.
And now
you said
yearly,
that was 1 million,
the rate yearly is 5,000 square kilometers,
okay,
which is about 1 football field per minute.
Okay, but the bit I'm confused about is that you said, that sounds like a big area that's being removed, but at the same time you talked about regulations are being lifted to make it easier for people to do business in the forest. Didn't you say something like that?
More or less. What I've I've tried to say is, sorry if I was not very clear, what I've tried to say is that Brazil did a great job slashing deforestation. 10 years ago, in 2004, it was out of control, completely out of control. In 10 years, the rate of deforestation decreased 80%, 80. It's a lot. It's still, the rate today is amazingly big. One football field, one football pitch a minute is a lot. 5,000 square kilometers is a lot. But it's 80% less than we had before. And is the biggest emissions reduction in the world on a single country. I agree with you, it's a lot. The other issue I was talking about is the forest code. I work with that, so I tend to think everyone knows about that, and it's not true. The regulation for forests in Brazil affects private property. Every farm, small or big, has to have a percentage of native vegetation untouched. And of course, springs and rivers and vulnerable areas, they need to be cared about. That doesn't happen, and that's not enforced. This law has never been enforced. The laws were relaxed 2 years ago with the justification, with this excuse that they were not enforced because they were too harsh. If you have less regulations, then it will be easier for farmers to comply. And the fight now is to make farmers comply with what we have now. This is what they wanted. It's less than most environmentalists think is ideal. And the water shortages in São Paulo show that some areas of the country, such as the southeast, they desperately need reforestation because actually the rivers are drying up. And because of the deforestation in the Amazon, the rains, and because of climate change as well, the rains are not as reliable, that they will come in the rainy season as they used to be. Is that more clear?
Yep, that's a good clarification. Brilliant. Okay, that's all we have time for, unfortunately. But thank you for giving that insight on the ground and for those connections and giving us lots to think about in terms of solidarity, in terms of our own impact and glimpses into what's happening there in Brazil. So, yeah, big round of applause for Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So the next event is a tour of the exhibition, kind of, and the evaluations, obviously. Don't forget the evaluations.
Evaluation forms, so I don't know where they're going to be, but on your way out, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm on sort of last, and we've gone over time, and there's been a lot of talking, so I'm going to keep this kind of short, actually. Hello? And there's going to be some drumming after me as well, so great if I just got off now. I'll talk a little bit about the exhibition, and I'll keep it short because there's stuff I've written anyway that we can read. But it's more of an opportunity in case you wanted to ask one or two questions. But in a nutshell, I've been working with Global Grooves, the fantastic company that have put this lovely centre up for a number of years, and the idea of actually doing it as an artist, doing a piece of artwork in collaboration with them came up, and something struck, and I'm a digital artist and a filmmaker, and Araldo said something which struck me quite strongly, which when he was talking about Brazilian Carnival, and he said that actually the Carnival itself isn't the point. It's it's not the point of what it's all about. It's actually about the social interactions between different people that create the carnival and the different connections that people make in the process that leads up to it. That's really what carnival is about. So, and I thought to myself, okay, in terms of myself as a digital artist, one of the things for me about digital media now is that suddenly you're in touch with people all over the world. And why aren't more people who do digital artists doing something like that, bringing people together in some way? And what I mean is actually collaborating, conversations in the sense that Brazilian Carnival seems to do that, rather than finding bits of footage here or doing some fancy scheme where people send stuff in and then you select it as a kind of open commercial call. Films like Life in a Day, for example, I don't know if anybody knows that film, which is quite successful, but it wasn't really a collaboration. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have something where we could have footage from different parts of the world? And I think that, I mean, in a way, the fact that we've been connecting with somebody in Brazil today and talking about Wangari Maathai has been a kind of extension of what I've been trying to do. And the piece of work which will be back on shortly, I'll put it on in a moment, and after the call that you can see. But it's got a number of different filmmakers, artists that have sent me material, and I've put it together in a kind of mask shape. And the point of that is to try and see the connection between different narratives. So we've got some a film from Zimbabwe, a guy who's talked about climate change in Zimbabwe. He got so enthused about the project that he actually sent me another film, which is more of an artistic take, no interviews, just visuals and music about climate change in Zimbabwe. So there's a woman in Uruguay who was involved in Carnival Arts Group, a women's Carnival Arts Group in Uruguay called Melaza. That's it, Melaza. And she's a visual anthropologist. Her name's Kuyumi. Her full film is on the screens there, and I used a section of it as a part of my installation. And she actually made a film especially for this installation, which is about Chico Mendes and mixing it with carnival visuals as well. There's a guy from Peru who sent me some music. There's Maya Chowdhury here who sent me some lovely poetry, which you haven't seen yet, but it'll be on shortly as part of the installation. A woman called Julia, I don't know if she's here. She was going to be try and make it here, but she wrote a poem especially for this piece as well. From Bangladesh, there's a guy called Badrul Alam who runs the largest peasant organisation in Bangladesh. They do things like occupations and sittings to get land back that's previously been grabbed from them. And there's also another organisation in Bangladesh. I was very interested in Bangladesh because of I don't know if you know that in Bangladesh there's predictions that it's going to be a quarter of it at least is going to go underwater in the next 30, 40 years. And it's the quarter where most people live as well. So I was very interested in Bangladesh, not just for that reason, but because it does very inspiring things. It's the first country to ban plastic carrier bags, for example. And the kind of consciousness and urgency there at a grassroots level is amazing. So I've got all these bits of footage, and to me, that was actually quite a lot of work. When we talk about being able to contact people in other parts of the world, and for them to have a relationship with us, it doesn't happen that way. It's actually quite a lot of hard work and a lot of time developing that relationship. And people are busy wherever they are. So there's this guy in the UK who wants to do this installation, and a few people managed to pick up the tab and get a rapport going. It's a new thing for me, and I think it's something that I would like to do more in my work, and I'd like to see different versions of that being done as a way of trying to keep connections going. Because I think that one of the things in the world is that the corporate businesses and the corporate powers, unfortunately, are extremely good at being able to do their own connections economically, in terms of business, in terms of dominating the world, and we need to up our game as well. And I think that through the arts, that's one of the things that I'd like to try and do. So in those terms, I also wanted to do something that illustrated some of the narratives that I was coming across. So I've got some corned beef from Brazil. We've got a designer bottle of water, plastic bottle of water, very disposable, from France. Some cotton from Bangladesh. So there's lots of stories behind all of these. There's some synthetic rubber from China in the form of a tyre. We talked about rubber already in terms of Chico Mendes. There's a mobile phone which has got lots of resonances, and there's a substance called coltan inside a mobile phone, which is invariably from DR Congo and fuels a lot of conflict there as well. There's some disposable plastic toys from a Christmas cracker, which are more or less deliberately designed to not last, although we've managed to keep them going for at least this installation. And they're all in beds of coal, which is a fossil fuel. So there's lots of resonances, and the idea of there being a kind of sense that these are all connected electronically, because the world is finance, global finance is connected electronically as well. But in this case, I wanted to do something where we could play the objects. So after the performance, I welcome all of you to come over, and there are some sticks here. And as you tap each one, you will get a sound being triggered, as well as something will change on the visuals. And if everyone plays, if they're all being played at the same time, it's great because you get lots of sort of, the mask kind of comes to life and starts almost dancing around a bit. And that's kind of the idea that as individuals we can play these things and create a dance of our own, rather than just sort of obeying what these are. But there's different sort of layers in it, which can get a bit deep, which I won't. It isn't the right time to do that. I don't think. So that's probably in a nutshell what this is about. I really wanted to make sure that the film contributions that people had sent me were available to see in their entirety. Some of them are really interesting, and they're available on the screens over there. And also, my intention was to sort of create almost like a playable documentary. So this whole thing becomes like an instrument, and you get narratives, very critical narratives about climate justice taking place continually while you're playing. So. And I think that was partly because a lot of the work I'd done, looking back on it, got me depressed. And I thought that actually, when we're looking at serious stuff, it can get depressing. Then we think, gosh, I can't deal with this all the time, or the amount of information all the time that we feel we have to crunch all the time. So, but I don't quite kind of agree with things for escape either. So I kind of like the idea. And I think music is great for that. I think music is a way in which you can kind of be uplifted, but also have a strong message. So I kind of wanted to use a way of connecting digital tools that allows it to take place, as well as the direct connectivity with documentary narratives and the people creating those narratives in one piece. So that's what I've been trying to do. Again, I'm never sure how successful it is. And so I'd really welcome any comments of any kind, or suggestions, or I'll just be observing, see what people make of it.
There are some evaluation forms, I think.
Yes, and there are some evaluation forms as well. So that's a way to sort of say, I'm really not sure what all that's about, Kooj. Anyway, if you can't say it to my face, which I hope you can. Any questions on that before we do something a bit more fun and have future leaders back for a performance? Any questions? Very happy. Yeah.
Just whether there's going to be access to any of this information and materials on a web page where we can go and click on different films and explore it.
Yeah, all the films, they're quite easy to search. If you search, all the names of the artists are on the website for this installation already. I haven't quite got round, just because of time, to physically put all the films up that I've got. Most of them, nearly all of them, are online, so they're not difficult to find. But I will be embedding them directly, as well as having the links on the website sometime this week, hopefully. If you want an update of when they actually go online, you can always subscribe to Metaceptive on Facebook or subscribe on the website for updates and so on. Any other questions or comments or jokes or anything? So environmentalists walked into a Carnival art centre. Right.
How many environmentalists does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
I don't know. Don't answer it.
Okay. I mean, I think we're all ready for some music, are we? Yeah. Are the musicians ready for some music?
Might be.
Oh, and also, while they're sort of getting themselves together, I'd just like to say, I'm actually quite struck by the number of people that have come to this. Some people have travelled some distance as well, so I feel very humbled by everyone's interest in today's event. Thank you very much for coming. I would really like to. I mean, I know it's about the evaluation as well, I suppose. But I would like to sort of make sure that events like this are done well and better and keep growing. So the evaluation is a part of helping us to do that. Part of life.
Part of our life.
Yeah. Got our cup of tea, haven't we?
Joking aside though, we do really appreciate you all coming, and for us particularly, maybe before some of our future leaders play, might be just interesting to you to know who they are. Yeah. So Global Grooves has always had a sort of vested interest in giving the next generation the kind of skills they need to be successful artists and to really enjoy an art form, learn about what it is to be an artist, all of it, not just the bit where we enjoy playing our instrument or writing a piece or that kind of thing. It's more about what other struggles do you have to overcome, what wider skills do you need, what personal skills do you need, and all of those things. And so last year we piloted a course called Future Leaders, which was for people from around the UK. One has come from Edinburgh. How exciting. Someone else from Edinburgh as well, isn't there? But one of the students who's 17 has come from Edinburgh to come to do this evening because he's, because, and a couple from Liverpool and one's a local lad from Manchester. And they can hear him getting ready. The real drummers, laughing, yeah. You can come out if you like. It's alright, it's not really a secret. It won't be a secret in a minute. It's great to let them present a little piece of what they do and who they are as part of the sort of, I suppose, unofficial opening of this building. This is the first time we've had an audience like you in here. I don't mean that in a nasty way, but it would be really great if you can show your appreciation to some of our future leaders.
Members of various environmental groups and NGOs staged an 3 different types of webcasts. So we just sort of played different stuff on it, and then whatever instrument, free rein. And I can't remember what I played. And now I tend to come down from Edinburgh on a semi-regular basis to do this sort of stuff. And I love it.
There's an evaluation called here as well.
Over here.
Over here? Where? Oh, actually, where?
According to the United Nations, over 70 million Bangladeshis will be affected by results of the climate change by 2050. The last preparations are completed and all the baggage is packed. The 3-week trip through Bangladesh starts in late 2011.
Okay, give it up.
The caravan 1986, they have been fighting for an agrarian reform and a fair allocation of land. By now, over 2 million people have joined a movement that also works towards climate protection internationally.
We are really agitated, and countries is actually good to mention them. We have Japan, we have United States, we have Canada, we have Australia.
So thank you very much. We haven't actually given a huge round of applause, so thank you very
And we don't see
audience. Let's take these global groovy solidarity vibes and very fast event, obviously evaluation.
Talk about the issue of equity is most impacted by climate change.
And if you do an evaluation, you can have a
greatly impacted by climate change. You are sure the video by Patrick. The science is very clear about climate change. We have seen the report, the most recent IPCC report, and to us, the ICC is.
Of course, it's a scientific panel of 1,000 scientists that want to know about this.
We are seeing actually us, it's confirmation of what we are seeing. It is predicting that by this and 2030, 2050, but we are saying that it is coming earlier than what predicted. And this is really scary. Whereas the industrialized countries are not taking cue on this. We have seen rivers drying up. Persistent droughts. We have seen floods, erratic snows which appeared in our mountains during my lifetime are symptoms of disappearing. So these are things which are saying there. So the issue of climate change is actually not to be said, to be told by somebody. We are experiencing that. And that's why we have come here even to offer testimony to the industrialized countries and the global community that it is indeed not a fiction, it is something which is happening.
We need to keep an eye and respond by make sure that we keep the land management in good condition. How can we educate others? Hey, stop doing this so we can look after the land, because there's two knowledges. You've got the Weibler way through the meteorology, and you've got our Bummer way. Our Bummer way, we of the indicators.